Hello, I'm reading Reshad Feild's book, The Invisible Way, A Time to Love, A Time to Die. He wrote this, it was published in 1979. He spent some time in Turkey and he is now back in the UK. He visited Elizabeth on instructions of his teacher, and he has met Noor, and they've fallen in love. And they are now visiting a man called John, which was recommended to them by Elizabeth. Her husband had been the local wise man. Oh, this is chapter 8. It's the last bit of chapter 8. Her husband had been the local wise man, some sort of a sheikh, I believe, but he had recently died. Her son lived with her, and although young, he was destined, we were told, to step into his father's shoes. We didn't know it then, but our coming had fulfilled a prophecy, and we had not been in the house for more than a few minutes of formality and mint tea when the old lady turned to us and announced that she wanted us to stay on with her in the village. "I've been waiting for you," she said, "for 20 years. Now, what would you have done?" John asked, smiling at me. "Knowing the type of person you are, it would not have been possible to resist the offer, would it?" I was so caught up by the story that I suspect I would have accepted, as John had said. I had never been one to reject an adventure. "I feel a bit chilled," John said. "Perhaps if you could put more logs on the fire and fetch me a small whisky, we could continue a bit longer. My shoulder is very painful at this time of the evening, and I have to change the dressing on the wound before I go to bed." "I could help you, John," Noor said. "I used to know a little about nursing." "Don't worry, my dear," he said. "I can manage quite well. And after all, you've only been here for a day. Wait a little bit, and then we will see." I went outside to get the logs from the shed. In the garden I stopped for a moment to collect myself. It was hard to remember that we had come to Wales only this morning. It was dark outside. There were no stars and I couldn't find an outside light. The shock of nearly falling over the woodpile returned me to my senses. I finally managed to get myself together enough to carry the logs back into the house. "Sorry I was so long," I said. "The normal sequence of time just doesn't seem to apply when I'm listening to stories like this. It's quite disturbing." "You will have to remember what I said about learning from experience," he replied, "and then perhaps you will begin to see how time works. Now, where was I? Oh yes, back in the village. Naturally, I could not resist the offer, but my friend, ironically, was much more skeptical, and after much argument, he decided to go on, taking the jeep with him. He agreed to pick me up in 2.5 weeks, but he was very upset. I kept pointing out to him that opportunities like this did not come along very often, but he couldn't see it. I wish now I had listened to him, particularly since a similar thing had happened once before. I had let him down by breaking my word, and finally I got myself into a lot of trouble. That is something that I hope both of you will not forget. Always question your motives, and never be vague about fulfilling what you have said you will do. For every time you break your word or deviate from your course for whatever reason, you are liable to lose a little will, so that finally you lose the power of discriminating the right action at the right moment. So I stayed on. Many things were given, and many of them became useful to me and to others later in life. But there came a time when something told me that it was time to leave. I felt I could not absorb any more, and the family was becoming more and more possessive. The date for the rendezvous was very near, so I thought I could wait until my friend came and then leave with him. By the day he was due to arrive, the old lady summoned me into her room. She told me that she wanted me to go into a cave with her son for 18 days. I answered that I felt it was time for me to go. She became angrier when I reiterated that I was going to leave, and shaking her fist under my nose, she shouted, eyes blazing, "You promised to stay." I pointed out that I had not said exactly how long, but her fury remained unabated. I was in such a state of fear that I tightened in that moment. I realized then that I was not prepared to really commit myself, even though I said I would, rather naively, in the beginning. I prayed under my breath that the jeep would arrive at that moment, but it didn't. It did not come for another 8 days, by which time I had developed a high fever and was really ill. When my friend finally arrived, he insisted we go back to Tangier immediately to see a doctor at the hospital. The old lady refused to see us off. I was taken to the hospital and developed this paralysis. The doctors argued and argued. Some said it was polio and others that it was a tropical disease, but the fact remained that I lost the use of my legs. There's no need to read anything more into the story than what I've said. He smiled at us, and I detected a twinkle in his eyes. But how did the cancer develop, John? I started. Let's stop for tonight. I'm tired now. What you can do is help me upstairs. I have put a steel runner on the side of the staircase. Let me show you. It's a marvelous invention. He wheeled his chair to the bottom of the stairs. I noticed that there were connecting rods under the arms of the chair that fitted into the steel runners. When they were fixed in place, he pressed a switch, and his chair started to move up the stairs. With a little help from behind, he was soon at the top. "Good night," he said. "I'm delighted to have you here. It will fulfill my own destiny and perhaps help you towards your own. Sleep well. God bless you. Noor went forward to kiss him, but he had already turned his chair round and was going into his room. It was the first time I noticed the appalling smell of the cancer. I tossed and turned all that night. John's story had been oddly disquieting. I wondered exactly what he was trying to tell us. Surely I had broken my promise 1,000 times, but so far was nothing so dramatic happening as the events he had described. I'm not a heavy sleeper at the best of times, but that night I was particularly uncomfortable. It was not fear I felt, but there were so many questions concerning the nature of destiny, fate, willpower, and chance. There were too many to let me sleep. Finally, I crept out of bed and sat by the window, with the reading light on beside me. Noor was sleeping deeply. I read a section called The Lover's Immortality from one of the volumes of the Matnavi, the book of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. 2 couplets were specifically significant to me at that time. Thou didst bestow on me the spiritual death and resurrection continually, and reason is trembling with fear of death, but love is bold. I must have fallen asleep sitting up in the chair, but I awoke with a start. It was already light, and when I looked back to the bed, I saw that Noor had gone. For a moment I panicked. It was the same sensation as being granted a taste of incredible beauty, and then suddenly returning to the same old rut. Years later, Noor had a terrible car accident. Someone telephoned me from the site. They did not know whether she would live, and it was going to take me 4 hours to get to the hospital where she had been taken. There was the same panic this time. We have so little trust. We fear that something or someone is going to be taken away. Trust, my teacher used to say to me. Why won't you trust? The shock brought back many memories of my confusion when I simply did not understand what my teacher was getting at. I could understand trusting in something that was tangible, or that I had realized through personal experience to be true. But to trust something beyond any concept was a different matter altogether. I did finally understand what was being said to me, however. I realized that trusting in something far greater than ourselves, a divine plan if you like, was only possible if we trusted and then perhaps finally knew that God is perfect. Thus each moment is perfect in essence. We could trust in this and work with it. What we often think to be trust is our ability to change something that already exists, and that was what Elizabeth was driving at when she talked about the three walls that divide us from truth, the walls of resentment, envy and pride. I sat watching the darkness lighten to a pale grey. The rain was coming down in a fine drizzle that would probably stop in an hour or two. I could hardly see the river, but sensed its beauty through the mist. I heard a dog bark and a man's voice calling to the cows. Shadowy figures passed by in single file through the gate, just below the house, and turned up the hill towards the nearby farm. It was the time of the dawn chorus, and the air was filled with birdsong. The creak of the gate drew my attention, and I saw Noor coming up the pathway. In the sudden relief, I felt rather foolish for my fantasies. She was wearing rubber boots and jeans with a heavy Irish sweater to keep out the damp. Her dark hair hung almost to her waist. It was quite wet. I watched her bend her head down and a little to one side, taking the hair in her hand and shaking out the moisture. "Hello," I said, looking down from the bedroom window. "Did you have a good walk? For a while I thought you had packed your bags and disappeared." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, smiling. Shortly, Noor came upstairs. Stripping off the heavy sweater, she lay on the bed beside me. "It is so beautiful out there. The early morning is an incredibly special time. Night thoughts have gone to sleep, and the thoughts of the day have not yet fully awakened. I love it. When I'm in the country, I always try to get up at dawn. You can see things so clearly then. Do you remember quoting me the words, like Ibn al-Arabi, 'All is contained in the divine breath like the day in the morning's dawn'? Well, that is what I felt this morning. It seemed that with preparation we could indeed set the pattern for the day. The breathing that we learned in Turkey helped me more perhaps than anything else to return to a state of order." "Do you really understand why we were given that rhythm?" I asked her. "Yes, I think I can say something about it now. Do you remember we were given the rhythm first, without any real explanation? I feel that was done initially so that we could come to understand something of ourselves. Although when something did happen, for me later, I was still unable to talk about it. But what do you think?" she asked. "Well, obviously, the rhythm of 7-1-7-1-7 has something to do with the musical octave. To breathe in to the count of 7, pause for 1, and then breathe out again to the count of 7 before pausing once more, to repeat the cycle brings in a steady rhythm. The benefit has been enormous for me as well, and I have practiced it ever since it was given. But I never understood why it should be called the mother's breath." Noor puzzled a moment. "You know," she answered, "when I was mad, it was terrifying, because the only reality I had were my illusions. In my fear, I wondered what would happen if they all went. Would there be anything of me left? But all that time I was continuously encouraged to practice that rhythm, to follow the breath in and out, to be on top of it. And little by little I became calm. Sometimes I could even see what lay within the moment. I remember writing in my notebook that the moment contains the womb of possibilities. So perhaps the mother's breath helps us to see the infinite possibility lying in the here and now. It's like the physical womb, isn't it? Does that make any sense? Noor leaned over and laid her head on my chest. We both listened to the rhythm. 7 counts. Pause. 7 counts. Pause. Her rhythm and my own were the same. There was a blending together that took us rapidly into a state of harmony and gentleness. We lay there for a while, hardly daring to speak. Then I said, the rhythm of the breathing that we were given was to help us to see that the present moment pulsates, expanding and contracting, coming into existence and passing out of it again instantaneously. Everything is born from this rhythmic pulsation of the womb of the moment, as you call it. Noor, the rhythm also produces the waves of vibration that makes up the subtle or formative worlds interpenetrating the grosser physical substance. It's all a question of different rates of vibration. The slower the rate, the denser the material. The higher the rate of vibration, the more refined and less stable the substance. Yes, that's it, she said, sitting up excitedly. And the rate of pulsation is the same as the rhythm of the breath. 7, 1, 7. Do you remember what Plato said? I can't remember the exact words, but he was implying that it was our human knowledge of the musical octave that kept things in balance and harmony. We were both very excited now, for a whole new world was opening up. If all this about the womb of the moment and the rate of its pulsation were true, then birth, sex, and death, the 3 acts that can be made in consciousness to bring about the real change, could be seen to be in one moment. Perhaps this pulsation is what it's all about. Perhaps this is what stands between the world of time and eternity itself. I remember being told, with great force, that it was necessary for humanity to know these 3 acts on quite a different level. I had even been told that before the knowledge was forgotten, many of the women who had given birth to extraordinary children had been to special schools, where they learned how to prepare themselves for conscious birth. It had been suggested, for example, that the mother of Alexander the Great had attended such a school. Already being with Noor had opened up so many things in those few days. We spent a long time lying on the bed talking. Both of us had, in our own individual ways, come on similar institutions, so the flow between us was overwhelming. A whole new way of living seemed possible, if everything is contained in the divine breath, like the day and the morning's dawn. Then, with this knowledge, this breath, this rhythm, we could surely be of service to the divine order on quite another scale. We nearly got carried away by theories just then, but Noor noticed in time. Come on, she said, pulling me to my feet. I can't take too much more of this now. And anyway, it's time for breakfast. But it's a whole new situation, isn't it? I mean, you can see the possibilities of our being together. Now you are the one who's talking too much, I teased. John was not awake yet, but the smell of bacon and eggs wafted from the kitchen, and Fordy soon appeared, wiping her hands on a cloth. I'm afraid that Mr. John's not feeling too well today, she said. So please help yourselves to whatever you want. I'm going to take him his breakfast in bed. He asked me to tell you to make yourselves comfortable, and he will come down later. You do know that he's a very sick man, don't you, sir? The doctor spoke with me just the other day about it, and we were doing our best to make his life as comfortable as possible. He does get overtired very easily, but he loves talking to people like you. I can't stop him, although I scold him sometimes for his own good. Noor and I spent a long time over breakfast. More and more we began to understand that we had been sent to John to experience what it would mean to die consciously. This concept alone touched on some huge subjects, particularly on the nature of healing. We realized that real healing has to do with the removal of all that stands between us and the truth. In that light, most so-called healers could be seen as very subtle forms of therapy, emotional or psychological. The journey we were all taking by being alive could never be said to be painless or indeed easy, but with people like John, Elizabeth and my own teacher in Turkey, we could begin little by little to see our way. In John's presence, we experienced a continuous overflowing of love that demanded nothing for itself. In the time we spent with him, we discovered that it was not so much what he said, but what was carried with his words in every breath that helped to lead us on, almost relentlessly upwards, towards our own freedom together, freedom from the fear of loss. Some years later, someone asked me, "What are we? Who are we? What is the purpose of life?" I could only reply from what I had learned in that short time with John. What I am, what anyone is merely a memory pattern to be erased in this lifetime. Who I am cannot be answered in any words that would fit the mind, and it is our obligation to question and make whatever sacrifice necessary to discover the purpose of life on earth. So that was chapter 8. Today is the 15th of April, and it is a Tuesday.